Thank you all for coming today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andy. I'm Charlie's second son. And it's very heartwarming for me to see so many of you here, to see how many lives Charlie Barrett touched. And just so you know, if there is a point where you wish to come up and say a few words, you will be given that opportunity a little later in the program. We're going to start off with some words from Pastor John Buckland of the Bridge Church.
It's so good to see each and every one of you here. I know it means so much to the family to see such a room full of people that represent lives that were impacted by Charlie. I would like to read the obituary as we begin. The obituary says, Charlie passed peacefully at age 82, Thursday, May the 12th. He is survived by his loving wife of 62 years, Marilyn, who he first met in 4th grade at Ascension School in Cleveland. They started dating at age 16. He's also survived by 3 sons, Joseph, Andrew, and Patrick, Glenn, Ann. Grandchildren, Michael, Catherine, Jack, and Charlie, and great-grandchildren, Jeremiah and Louisa. He was a 1958 graduate of St. Edward High School as part of one of the first graduating classes to spend all 4 years in the now current school building on Detroit Avenue in Lakewood. Despite uncertain finances at times, he prioritized education for his 3 sons, all of whom graduated from the same school. Charlie became a union plumber in Cleveland Local 55 and attained journeyman status, continuing his work there for 17 years. He subsequently changed careers and became a building inspector for the city of Lakewood in the commercial division. For a portion of his 30-year tenure with the city, he also served as building commissioner. He retired in 2007. After retirement, he continued to indulge his love of animals with his dogs. Marilyn and Charlie had 8 faithful canine friends over the course of the last 50 years. Charlie was known for his generosity and commitment as a 49-year member of the Cleveland area AA community. He was widely known for the joy he took in acquiring a varied area of useful offbeat prizes for raffles at meetings. His time in AA was marked by a determined adherence to the one day at a time motto of the program. However, he never took himself too seriously. He displayed a frequent ability to tease and joke with friends and family alike. His dry wit kept everyone around him on their toes, laughing. Once he began his job in city government, he was required to wear a dress shirt and tie to work every day, which spurred his love of shoes and ties. He leaves behind an uncountable collection of neckties and all styles of shoes. Looking through his photo albums, one also discovers an affinity for baseball caps. He would regularly cull his collection, keeping only his favorites, making room to acquire more. In fact, one is hard-pressed in looking at his photos to find documented evidence that he ever wore the same one twice. He loved music, amassing a CD collection that continued to grow throughout his life thanks to garage sales and thrift stores. Donations in lieu of flowers can be made to St. Bonaventure Indian Mission and School of New Mexico, a longtime charity of Charlie's, as he believed in the importance of the availability of fresh water for everyone. What a beautiful memory the family wrote in putting that together. Every one of you, that when you leave this funeral and this time that we have together, you're going to hear a lot of stories. I want to commission you to walk out of here with a mission and say, you know what? I'm gonna make this world better. Because that's what Charlie encouraged me to do. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out today, friends and family and everyone else. I really appreciate your presence here tonight. Charles Edward Barrett, my dad. I'm gonna go over some fun stuff.
Who are you?
What's that?
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Charlie's son, Patrick. So I'm gonna go over some fun stuff that usually isn't in an obituary, and then some serious stuff, some not so serious stuff, some funny stuff. Dad had a great sense of humor, so I don't want it all to be so serious. So his first car was a used light green 1954 two-door V8 Ford Coupe stick. He bought it for $800 when he was 19. You heard that he was a plumber for 17 years, worked for Ford, and spent the majority of his career as a building inspector and building commissioner for the city of Lakewood. He was no-nonsense, rules and regulations inspector. He was very good at Yahtzee and Scrabble. He liked butter pecan ice cream and had an expansive collection of cereal in the cabinet above the refrigerator. I don't know if you people knew that. He had a special affinity to Raisin Bran Crunch. I heard earlier it was read that he had an affinity for baseball hats. That's code for balls. He loved dogs. Magoo, Tootsie, Hunter, Grover, a lot of them are in the picture there. Woody, McDougal, and many more. He loved them. Little Peanut, not so much. He only bought used cars. He taught me to be financially responsible. He paid his plumber's union dues for 30 years after he stopped being a plumber. I asked one day, why did he do that? And he said, in case the building inspector thing didn't work out. You know he lived a long life because he attended the Browns' last championship at Old Municipal Stadium in 1964. True, they did win it once. He used to say to people the last 20 years, how about them Browns? And people would give him the strangest looks. It was his way to poke fun at people and the Browns and the absurdity of it all. He loved SpongeBob SquarePants, his favorite episode being the one where SpongeBob took his pants into the dry cleaners and only had a pair of round pants to wear, which caused problems. Dad looked the part of a professional at work. He was a snazzy dresser with an impressive tie collection, the Charlie Barrett collection. He took his, which were all my brothers and my Andy's sons here are also wearing them. So he took his work very seriously, and his mentor, boss, Walter Geist, taught him a lot. Dad was a worker. He was a provider. He had anger issues and other issues. My mom was incredibly patient for so many years, and he was man enough, with a healthy nudge from my mom, in a time and a place where it wasn't as accepted, to seek out the therapy to become the man he thought he should be. He liked the poo-poo platter at the Chinese restaurant at Cam's Corner, and he enjoyed Athens pizza on Rocky River Drive. Who wrote this stuff? He was an accomplished doodle artist. Many of his works have been saved by Mom. Some have been made into Christmas wrapping paper and t-shirts, believe it or not. My dad had a healthy disgust for idiots. I can still hear him say, let me tell you something. Holy crap, people are nuts. He appreciated the journey of where he came from and where he got to, but he never took it for granted. He appreciated the little things in life. He could come back from buying half-off pickles and seltzer water at Mark's and feel like he had won the day. What a great country we live in. You turn on the faucet and fresh water comes out. He was at peace in his last 5 years of his life. He would say to me many times, "I have such a great life." Driving us to school at St. Ed's in the morning, he played country music with Conway Twitty and Merle Haggard on the 8-track in his Plymouth Fury. The fact that that was torture to us boys was just a bonus. He gave me the talk when I was ready to go off to college, which by the time it got to me as the youngest boy was a quick talk that was more laughter than serious. He stressed a solid education, a St. Edward education. Our family wasn't flush with money, and I would work summers to help pay for high school. I thought it was ridiculous to pay for high school if we could go to the public school for free. I said I could go to public school if need be. He was a St. Ed's man. Uncle Dave and Uncle Dan were, as well as my brothers. He would have none of it. I was going to St. Ed's. Not St. Ignatius. Okay. I had battled nerve pain and headaches for the better part of 8 years, about 15 years ago. The compassion my dad and mom had for me will always be special to me. I inherited sarcasm from both my parents, and Dad had the most special, wonderfully, painfully dry sense of humor. My brother Joe and Dad invented the chart in the late 60s. The chart was a football weekly pick and pull between the two that expanded to family and special invited friends years later. We roll out butcher paper, line it with a yardstick, write everyone's picks on them. We would all throw in a dime, a lot of money in 1972, to me when I was 7 years old. Pick your game straight up, not to the spread. Pick points for Monday night as a tiebreaker. If you got a game wrong, it was crossed off with a large red magic marker. The fumes would almost knock you out. Winner take all. My grandfather stopped playing when our dog Magoo won the pool in consecutive weeks. Dad picked a perfect undefeated week in 1969, which was quite rare. The chart, as it was known, still exists to this day at our pub in Portland, Oregon, the Gladstone Street Pub. Open 7 days a week, great burgers, a good happy hour. My dad had a notorious temper for some years when we were kids. He may have had a heart attack if you don't take out the garbage by 7 o'clock, but on the big stuff, he would be calm and compassionate. I took my mom's cutlass down to the flats to see Modern English at Peabody's Down Under. I didn't want to pay for parking lots, so I parked on some railroad tracks by a brick warehouse. When we came out the show, the car had all the tires stolen off it. My brother Andy drove us home after we had the car towed to Al's service station. By this point, it was probably 4 a.m. I'm scared to death of my dad blowing a stack when I get home. I take the long walk and knock on the bedroom door, tell him the bad news, and he says, "Well, nothing we can do except get a few more hours sleep and get up and go to work." I was like, "What? Wow, that's so cool." He was manager of my Little League team when I was 8 years old, and for a time the commissioner of the Peerless Boys Baseball League. I was manager in that league 10 years later. He was a great softball pitcher. I remember watching him pitch in Lakewood. I still pitch myself for the softball team in Oregon, and he would give me tips on backspin and throwing the knuckleball and stuff. He disciplined the Barrett boys, occasionally with spanking. Can you imagine that, the nice Barrett boys? For years he would get back from work and dump out his pockets on the desk. There would be change accumulating throughout the week. I thought, who's going to notice a few quarters and dimes missing every other day? My dad and I were walking in the Majors baseball field one night, and I took out my little glad baggie full of coins, and he said, "Where did you get that?" I froze. No words came out of my mouth, and I just looked up at him with guilty eyes. "Okay, we'll deal with that when we get home." Now, even the staunchest opponents of physical punishment would concede that the Barrett brothers needed and deserved punishments for their ways. The spanking I got, and I never touched that money on the desk ever again. He was the guy that was sitting in the living room in the dark by himself on a summer day when I was a child. I ran in from playing outside as the sun was setting fast. It was dark, pitch black in that living room. He didn't say anything. Johnny Cash was playing on the record player. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? He didn't have a den, an office, a creative space, a man cave. He had a wife and 3 kids, and it was Cleveland in 1973. He was in the early stages of not drinking, and he was figuring things out. It was his way of meditating, I suppose. Even at that young age, I was wide-eyed in wonder at what he might be thinking. I was too young to grasp what his hardships might be with battling addiction. I had no clue. His father was an alcoholic and very distant, with seemingly no connection to his father. A history of alcoholism on my father's side of the family, and he was trying to break that. The Charles Barrett story is one of salvation, one of recovery, one of rebirth. He stopped drinking in 1972. In December, it would have been, this year, it would have been 50 years sober. I may be more proud of that than anything I've done in my life. Because you know what? It isn't always how you ended up, it's where you came from and how well you grew from where you started. We all don't begin life in the same starting blocks. Some start way ahead, some start way behind, some start at the starting line. I was one of the lucky ones. My folks didn't have much money, and Dad had his addiction problems, but they both provided for us and loved us. He loved hanging out with his AA buddies at the diner, telling their funny stories, cracking their little jokes. That was therapy for them. You can't tell the Charlie Barrett story without AA. Redemption and salvation doesn't happen without AA. But you know what? You also can't tell the Charlie Barrett story without my mom. He needed AA, but he also desperately needed the incredible patience, guidance, and love of my mom. I shudder to think of the person my dad would have been without my mom. I want to thank those of you who saw him in the hospital these last few weeks and months, getting sick out in Oregon and being unable to make it back until this week. It really meant a lot to me that his AA brothers and my brothers were able to see him in his last days. You know, Dad turned his life around, and we all got to benefit from it as a family. And I'm a lucky man. The last thing my dad said to me was, "Love you, kid. Thank you."
Next, I'd like to have Tom R. There's more than one Tom here. Is Tom here? This way over. There we go. Tom?
It was my privilege to have known and participated with Charlie. As I think about it, he was a man of character, a man of integrity, and a great example for me and others. And we've heard about his sense of humor, and that always stood out with me. And the cereal story. Charlie and I would have these discussions, and we had ongoing discussions regarding Raisin Bran, Post versus Kellogg. And we ran into the discussion that got kind of lengthy, and we come to the conclusion after the end of our discussion that we would just both agree that they were good products. That was on a Friday night. Monday, I get a call from Charlie with an addendum. Apparently, at the meeting on Sunday, he did a straw poll with people in the meeting. he come to the conclusion that his choice was the winner. I explained to him that it was unfair for him to run a poll without advising me about it. And his response was, "You didn't ask." And then hung up. And his humor was like that the subtlety all the time. He calls me and says, "You want to go to a meeting this morning?" And I said, "I am going to a meeting this morning. I'm going up to this meeting, and actually I'm leading." And there was this long silence on the end of the phone, and then finally he says, "Oh, what the hell, I'll go anyway." We spent a great deal of time going to thrift stores and throughout the city and discussing the value of a $3 item. And should we let it sit for a week and come back and see if it's on clearance? Charlie was in the moment with you all the time. And he was one of the most non-judgmental people I've ever met. And he, in my opinion, was the eye of the storm. When something would be going on in someone's life, or certainly in mine, he was always very supportive. And just his presence would bring a calm. And in his ability to say, that's what it is today, it's not to say it's going to be like that tomorrow. And the idea of holding out hope, he always presented that in all of his interactions, certainly with me, that the power of change and the power of the program to reach out that level of hope will change your circumstances. 44 years of interacting with Charlie, and I can tell you that the world was a better place because of him. And I became a better person because of his influences. And we will all suffer the loss of him, but he'll live on in our memories.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Mr. Dan Prozik.
Hi, I'm Dan, I'm Charlie's brother-in-law, and Charlie and Marilyn, it's a love story for the ages. As it says in the obituary, for fourth grade they met, and I think Charlie was always around, whether it was good or bad, but Marilyn did date some Ignatius boys in high school, but she learned that it would take a Saturn man to produce a quality family. And it's it. Yeah. So